You don't need a platform to have a purpose. You don't need to feel ready to be able to walk into your calling. You know, too many of us are waiting. We're waiting for that right time, that right opportunity, that right title. But what if I told you that God isn't waiting for you to be perfect? He is just waiting for your obedience. Terry Savelle always says it like this: somebody in need is waiting on the other side of your obedience. Hey, if we haven't met yet, I'm Haley, and I am so glad you're watching. If you're ready to stop waiting and start walking in your God-given purpose, you're in the right place. You know, too often we wait for a title, a stage, or someone to recognize what's in us before we begin to act. But the truth is, you don't need permission to walk in what God has already called you to do. Today, I want to share with you why you can stop waiting and start walking in your calling right where you are. Because your calling doesn't begin with opportunity. It begins with obedience. You know, you don't have to feel ready to get started. If I'm being honest, and I am, I would have never started this YouTube channel if I had waited until I felt ready. I mean, before releasing my very first video, I spent weeks prepping what I was even going to talk about, designing my logo, changing my logo, designing my channel cover art, changing my channel cover art, and so much more. In fact, I still don't feel like I'm ready to have this YouTube channel. I don't have the best camera. I'm using my cell phone. I don't have the best lighting. This is like a small ring light and the ceiling fan light. So I'm not ready by the world standards, right? But I know that if I can impact just one person, I will have made a difference in this world. And that's all that really matters. Ready or not, here I come. You know, we often think I'll start when I feel more confident or more equipped. But readiness is not a prerequisite. Obedience is. When you move, God moves with you. Look at Moses in Exodus 3 and 4. When God called Moses from the burning bush to lead Israel out of Egypt, Moses didn't feel ready. In fact, he gave a bunch of excuses. Who am I that I should go? What if they don't believe me? I'm not a good speaker. And finally, he just said, please don't send me, send somebody else, right? God didn't answer his fear with reassurance about Moses' abilities. He just said, I'll be with you. And then you look at Gideon in Judges 6. Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress, hiding in fear when God called him to save Israel. His first response, but Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest of the weakest, and I am the weakest of these, right? God's reply, go in strength, the strength you have, I will be with you. Are you noticing a theme here? And then you look at David in 1 Samuel. David was anointed king when he was just a shepherd. You know, off the top of my head, I can't think of any similarities in the qualifications between being king and being a shepherd. But that's the key. It's not about our qualifications. It's about God's calling and God going with us in whatever we do. I like the quote that says, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right? I'll say it again for those in the back. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So start scared, start unsure, start small, but just start. And stop waiting for permission. You already have a commission. You don't need someone to hand you a mic or give you a title or validate your gifts before you begin walking in your purpose. If God has already called you, that's all the permission you need. You don't need permission when you already have a commission, right? Jesus already commissioned us in Matthew 28. He said, go and make disciples. He didn't say, go once you're famous. He said, go. That means your obedience is the only qualification you need. You know, calling begins with obedience, not opportunity. You know, we think calling comes with a spotlight, but the thing is, God sees obedience in the shadows. Looking back at the life of David again, when the prophet Samuel came to anoint him as the next king, David wasn't even invited to the ceremony. He was left in the field with the sheep. And then, after being anointed, David didn't rush to the throne. He went back and tended the sheep some more. It was during that time that he learned the courage by fighting off lions and bears. So that when Goliath appeared, he wasn't afraid. He said, "The Lord delivered me from a lion and a bear, so he will deliver me from this Philistine." You know, David's public victory was born out of private obedience. Zechariah 4:10 says, "Do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." Look at Joyce Meyer's life. Joyce Meyer didn't start with a huge worldwide ministry, thousands of people attending her conferences, having written over 135 books, or her TV broadcasts. She began by teaching a small Bible study in her home in the mid-1970s. There was no microphone, no media crew, just a desire to obey God and to help people grow. You know, once she shared how she felt called to teach but had no formal training or platform. But still she obeyed, and that obedience opened doors, and over time, her influence grew to what it is today. You see, faithfulness in small rooms leads to fruitfulness on big stages. Don't you love that? Okay, you know, so many of us have to overcome fear and even imposter syndrome before we get started, right? You see, fear says you're not enough, but God says, "I made you for this." Imposter syndrome whispers, "Who am I to do this?" But God says in Ephesians 2:10, you are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. You're not doing this in your own strength. You are walking in God's power and purpose. You know, one great example of this is Letitia Wright. I hope I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't. But from the Black Panther. Letitia was and has openly shared about how her fame and success didn't shield her from fear and anxiety. Early in her career, she struggled with depression and felt lost, even questioning her place in the industry. But through a deepening faith in Christ, she found healing and courage. You know, when she originally accepted the role of Shuri in the Black Panther, it wasn't just a career step, it was a faith step, right? And now she's known not only for her talent, but for boldly sharing her faith in Hollywood. Her obedience, even in the midst of fear and anxiety, is now inspiring a generation. God doesn't need you to be fearless, just faithful. So start small, start faithful, and let God multiply it. Ecclesiastes 11:4 says, "Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." If you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never begin. You don't need a fancy setup or a big audience just to be obedient. Just use what you have, where you are, and trust God to do the rest. My absolute favorite Bible verse says, "A man's heart plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps." That's in Proverbs 16:9. In other words, God can't steer a parked car, so start moving. You will never feel 100% ready. You may never feel big enough or equipped enough, but you can start now with what you have. Think about Steven Furtick. You know, Steven Furtick did not launch Elevation Church with the massive team or budget that he has today. In 2006, he and a small group of people moved to Charlotte, North Carolina with a vision and a belief that God would provide. He preached in small rooms. They even recorded the sermons in a garage and edited them themselves, and believed that God would bring the increase. And now Elevation Church reaches hundreds of thousands every single week around the world. But it all started with one step of obedience. So here are some practical steps that you can use to take action today. Number one, ask God. Ask him, what step of obedience are you asking me to take today? Don't overthink it. Just ask, listen, and move. Number two, write it down. Clarity brings movement. Writing your next step builds focus and momentum, right? Number three, declare truth over fear. Say this out loud. The one who called me is faithful and he will do it. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:24. And lastly, encourage someone else. You're not alone in this journey. Help someone else take their step of faith too, and we'll rise together. Don't wait for a platform. Don't wait to feel perfect. Don't wait for someone to say go. Start messy. Start unsure. Start with trembling hands, but just start. Your obedience is more important than your perfection, because on the other side of your yes is someone else's breakthrough, blessing, or even salvation. Remember Terry's quote, somebody in need is waiting on the other side of your obedience. So stop waiting for permission. You've already been called. You've already been commissioned. Now it's time to go. You don't need permission when you already have a commission. I love that it rhymes. Start where you are, use what you have, and trust God to do what only He can do. The time is now. Hey, if this encouraged you today, don't forget to hit that like button, comment, subscribe so you don't miss future messages. And I'd love to hear from you. What step of obedience is God asking you to take today? Drop it in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching today. Have a blessed week.